Okay, let's unpack this. If you've spent any time, building stuff for the web, you definitely know that feeling, that initial hurdle.
Hmm.
You've got an idea, maybe a design, and then, you have to start laying down the basics, the buttons, the forms, all that structure.
Right. It can feel so repetitive, like you're basically rebuilding the same things over and over just to get the visual part out.
Exactly. That starting from scratch feeling on the UI layer, it's a real drag sometimes.
Yeah, getting those components right, making sure it's responsive, wrestling with the CSS. It's necessary work, but it really does eat up valuable time.
Time you'd probably rather spend on the unique logic or the cool features of your project.
Definitely.
So, what if there was a tool, maybe something using AI specifically designed to kind of jumpstart that whole process, to
No.
handle that repetitive UI stuff?
Well, that's pretty much where Vercel's V0 comes into the picture.
Okay, V0.
It's positioned as this generative AI assistant,
Yeah.
really focused specifically on UI development.
So it's not just about speed then.
Well, speed's a big part, but based on the sources, the ambition seems broader. It's about helping developers, sure, but also designers, product folks, letting them skip some of that initial, maybe tedious groundwork.
Right, so they can focus higher up on the core logic, the actual user
Yeah,
experience.
exactly. Focus on the custom bits.
Makes sense. And look, we've gathered a bunch of material here, articles, the official docs, even some project descriptions that use it.
Yep.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to figure out, what is V0? How does it actually function day to day? And maybe most importantly, what does it mean for you listening?
Right. Whether you're a seasoned dev, a designer, a PM, maybe even just curious about building web stuff.
Exactly. We'll pull out the key insights from all this source material.
Let's do it. We'll try and extract the core knowledge, see how people are using V0 right now, and yeah, explore what potential it holds.
Okay, so starting right at the beginning,
Yeah.
you called it a generative AI platform for UI. What does that actually do?
So, at its core, V0 takes your description like plain English text prompts.
Just type what you want.
Pretty much, you type what you want, and it tries to turn that into actual working code,
Hmm.
specifically UI components.
Okay, so I tell it I need a login form and it builds it.
That's the idea, yeah. You describe the component, the layout, whatever, and V0 generates the code for it. The sources really emphasize its goal is to assist developers.
Assist, not replace.
Right. Streamline the UI design,
Mhm.
handle those repetitive bits so you can, focus on the more complex stuff, the application logic, the overall function. It's about smoothing out that initial UI creation phase.
Okay, I get the what's. But who is this really aimed at? Is it just a tool for hardcore developers?
Well, what's really interesting looking at the sources is how broad they're casting the net.
Oh.
Yeah, it's explicitly mentioned as being designed not just for developers. They're talking
Mhm.
designers, product managers, entrepreneurs, and even people who are like total beginners with minimal technical background.
Okay, that's interesting. Beginners too. So how does it help them beyond just, writing code faster? Does it lower the barrier somehow?
That seems to be a key point. For devs, yeah, it speeds up prototyping, cuts down on boilerplate, we get that.
Sure.
But for others, like a PM, they can quickly mock up a feature idea, get something visual fast. Or a designer can see their layout actually functioning as a component without waiting for a developer.
Ah, so you can test ideas, iterate really quickly, get something tangible to show people.
Exactly. And one source specifically mentions this humanitarian's AI Vercel Zero project.
For Cell Zero.
Yeah, sounds like an initiative using VIA Zero to help students, nonprofits, small orgs, people without deep tech skills
Mm.
build professional-looking websites.
Wow, okay. So V0 generates the front-end code they might struggle with otherwise.
That's the idea. The name Vercel Zero kind of hints at that, right?
Uh-huh.
Starting from close to zero technical knowledge. It really underlines that potential to empower a wider range of people.
All right, so we know what it is, who it's trying to help. Let's get into the practical side. How do you actually use it? What's the workflow feel like?
So the main way you interact is through a chat interface, like talking to a chatbot. You type in your prompts, describe what UI you want, and you can also apparently attach files like images or code snippets to give it more context.
Right, context helps, and then it gives you back .code. But you mentioned blocks.
Yeah, blocks seem to be Vercel's term for the specific kinds of content V0 generates. Each block type has different capabilities. The sources talk about two main ones right now.
Okay, lay the first one on me.
The big one is the UI generation block. This is the core function, right? It generates client-side UI components.
In what languages or frameworks?
The sources say React, Vue, Svelte, and even just plain HTML with CSS. So pretty broad coverage of modern front-end tech.
And once it generates the code, what can you do with it?
You've got options. You can copy the code straight out. You can download it as a file. Or, interestingly, you can use the ShadCN CLI tool to install it directly into your local project.
Install it directly, like npm install.
Kinda, yeah, using the ShadCN CLI. One source even mentioned you can scaffold a whole new Next.js project structure from a generated component using that CLI.
Whoa, okay. Scaffolding a project from just one component description, that's quite a shortcut.
It seems like it.
And these components it generates, are they just static visuals? Or can they actually do stuff?
No, they're meant to be functional client-side components. The code can include JavaScript. It can call browser APIs, fetch external data.
So real interactivity.
Yeah. One source even pointed out it can pull in third-party libraries like React 3 Fiber if you wanted to generate, say, a component with 3D graphics.
Okay, React 3 Fiber. So it's not just basic forms and buttons. That's pretty advanced.
Right. They're not just static pictures. They can be interactive, dynamic.
Cool. And the second type of block?
That's the code execution block. This one lets V0 write and actually run simple JavaScript snippets right there in the chat.
Why would you need that?
Seems useful for quickly testing small functions in isolation, maybe utility functions or little logic bits. And what's really interesting is that V0 can apparently generate test cases for the code it just wrote in that block.
Wait, it writes code and then writes tests for its own code.
That's what the source says. Pretty meta.
Okay, that is meta. So using this,
Yeah.
is it just like type a prompt, get perfect code, you're done, or is it more involved?
Definitely more involved. The sources describe it as a very iterative process. One piece called it the Maya method,
Maya method, like the software.
maybe inspired by it.
Yeah.
The idea is type, check, iterate, repeat. You start simple, give it a prompt.
Right.
V0 gives you a first draft. You look at it, you check it. Then you tell V-Ev, okay, change this or add that, refine it through more conversation,
Oh, okay.
and it generates an updated version. You just keep going back and forth like that.
So it's less like giving a final order and more like having a conversation, kind of sculpting the UI with the AI.
Exactly. It's a refinement loop. The sources also mention projects within VO.
Okay.
These help you organize your different chats or UI explorations. And a key feature is uploading data sources to a project.
Data sources, like what?
Could be anything relevant, design files, style guides, maybe API schemas.
Yeah.
VO can then reference that context across all the chats within that project.
Ah, so it stays consistent.
Yeah, hopefully leading to more relevant outputs. You can also add custom instructions to a project, like telling it to always use a certain tone or follow specific coding patterns.
That project level context sounds crucial for getting usable results, especially on bigger things. Okay, so when V0 spits out this code, what's actually under the hood? What's the tech stack it's using or generating for?
It's definitely built on and integrates tightly with, well, the modern Vercel ecosystem, really. The generated code is primarily geared towards React,
Makes sense, given Vercel.
and specifically within the Next.js framework. That seems to be the sweet spot.
Okay, React, Next.js, standard stuff for many devs today. How does it handle styling?
It heavily uses Tailwind CSS. The sources are pretty clear that the components it generates are styled using Tailwind's utility classes.
Okay, utility first styling. Got it. And the components themselves. Does it use libraries?
Oh yeah, it leans heavily on the ShadCN UI component library.
ShadCN, okay. Heard a lot about that one.
Right. The generated components are designed to mesh seamlessly with ShadCN. You can even tell V0 use the ShadCN button component here, or it might infer it based on visual references you provide.
And ShadCN is known for being built with accessibility in mind, isn't it?
Exactly. ShadCN itself uses Radix UI primitives underneath.
Right.
And Radix handles a lot of the tricky accessibility stuff, the YIRIA attributes, keyboard navigation, focus management. So that foundation is baked in. Plus, the generated components are designed to be responsive.
So React Next.js, Tailwind for style, ShadCN, Radix for components and accessibility, and it's responsive. That's a pretty solid stack.
Definitely a modern setup.
So how do you actually get that code out of Zero and into your own project?
The process sounds pretty direct based on the descriptions. You grab the code from the UI generation block in V0.
Just copy paste.
Yeah, usually copy it. Then you paste it into a new component file in your project. Probably a .tsx file if you're using TypeScript with React.
And then you just need to make sure you've got the right libraries installed.
Precisely. You'll need the dependencies in your package.json, things like Tailwind Sauce, Shadzilo, Redixui, maybe a headless React depending on the component.
Standard dependency management.
Yep. Once the file's there and the dependencies are installed, you just import your new V0 generated component into your Next.js pages or wherever else you need it, just like any other React component.
Seems fairly straightforward for someone comfortable in that ecosystem. Okay, but the sources also talk about really maximizing V0, going beyond just simple prompts. What are some of the more powerful techniques or features?
Right. This is where it gets more interesting for really speeding things up or getting higher fidelity results. One key thing is providing detailed requirements.
Garbage in, garbage out, basically.
Pretty much. The quality of what V0 produces seems highly dependent on how clear and specific your prompt is. One source even suggested using another AI like ChatGPT just to help you write better, more detailed prompts before you even give them to V0.
Huh. Using AI to talk to AI better. Okay. So instead of make a form, be really specific about columns, fields, styles, validation.
Exactly. The more detailed, the better the starting point V0 gives you. Another really cool feature is revising specific components.
How does that work?
After V0 generates something, maybe a complex layout,
Yeah.
you can apparently use a select tool to click on just one specific part in the preview, like one button or one input field.
Ah, like inspecting element.
Sort of, but then you give V0 natural language instructions just for that selected bit, like make this button green or add placeholder text here.
Okay, that's super useful for fine-tuning without regenerating the whole thing every time. What if I have an existing design I want to match, like a mock-up or even another website?
Yeah, that's covered too. You can provide a reference. You can give V0 a URL of a live site. It'll apparently take a snapshot and try to generate components that match the style and structure using ShadCN and Tailwind.
Match a live site. Wow.
Or, even more powerfully, you could upload a static image, a design mockup from Figma, a screenshot, whatever, and V0 will attempt to generate UI code based on that visual reference.
Okay, uploading an image and getting code. That could seriously change the design to code workflow.
Potentially, yeah.
And once you're happy or happy enough with what it's generated, what then?
You can share or deploy it easily. There's apparently a simple button to get a shareable preview link, send that off for feedback.
Nice.
And being Vercel, there's often an option to instantly deploy that generated UI as a live app right from the V0 interface.
Deploy straight from the AI chat.
Seems like it. Lets you get a prototype live super fast for testing, though you can turn off the deployment option if you don't want it.
Right, and if you're making lots of changes, iterating like you said, how do you keep track?
It has built-in version control, according to the sources. As you tweak the UI with prompts, V0 keeps a history of those changes.
Oh, okay.
So you can look back at previous versions, maybe revert if you went down a wrong path, essential for that iterative sculpting process.
Yeah, definitely need an undo button sometimes. You mentioned ShadCN UI integration is heavy. Is there more to it than just using its components?
Yeah, it seems quite tight. Apparently, if you browse the ShadCN UI library on Vercel's site, many components have an Open in V0 button now.
Ah, so you can start with a known good component.
Exactly. Click that, and it brings that high-quality ShadCN component right into your V0 chat. Then you can use prompts to customize it, add specific fields, tweak styles, maybe integrate some basic logic before you pull it into your actual code base.
Okay, that's smart. Start with a solid foundation, then use the AI for the specific tailoring. Feels like a good balance.
It does sound like a powerful workflow. And speaking of design tools, there's integration with Figma, too.
How deep does that go?
You can apparently structure your Figma file with components, reference specific frames, then you give V0 the Figma URL.
And it tries to replicate the design in code.
Yeah, generate UI code that mirrors your Figma design pretty closely. Another step towards bridging that design dev gap, making things more consistent.
That Figma link is huge. What if you're exploring ideas like, should this card look like A or B?
There's a feature for that. Fork a chat.
Like forking a Git repo.
Similar concept. You can branch off your current conversation at any point. Perfect for trying out different design variations or maybe a totally different approach to a component without disrupting the main thread you're working on.
Okay, that's essential for experimentation.
And you can even apparently fork popular shared V0 projects made by others. So you could start from something cool someone else built.
Oh, building on community work. Nice shortcut. Now, can V0 help make these UIs actually do more than just look pretty? Can it connect to data?
Yes, the sources do touch on enhancing prototypes with AI agents.
Vercel's AI agents.
Right. By integrating those, you can hook up your V0 generated UI components to live data sources called APIs. The example given was wiring up a dad jokes API using React hooks inside a V0 generated component. So the AI helps build the visual structure, and then you can use maybe other Vercel tools or just code to bring it to life with real data.
So the AI isn't just the structure, it can help with the plumbing too, or at least make it easy to add the plumbing. That feels like a step beyond typical UI generators.
It definitely blurs the lines a bit.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly fast, potentially very powerful, but AI generating code always brings up questions, concerns. What important considerations do the sources highlight? Things you really need to keep in mind.
Absolutely critical points here,
Yeah.
and the sources are refreshingly direct about them. First and foremost, accessibility.
Right, you mentioned it builds on Radix, which is good.
It is good, but the sources are emphatic.
Yeah.
You must still manually test your generated UI for accessibility.
Manually,
Yes.
even with Radix underneath, yes.
They recommend tools like Axe and Lighthouse, the automated checkers, as a part of your process. But they explicitly state automated tools are not enough. Manual testing by a human is essential
Why?
because AI-generated code, even on a good foundation, might still have gaps, might miss nuances, might need improvement for certain user needs. They actually ask for feedback if you find accessibility issues.
Okay, that's a really important caveat. The AI gives you a starting point, maybe handle some basics, but human oversight and expertise are still non-negotiable for accessibility. What else?
Security. Same principle, really.
Don't trust the AI blindly.
Basically,
Yeah.
yeah. It's still code. You need to follow standard security practices. The sources mentioned checking the generated code for vulnerabilities using tools like SNCC or similar scanners. Audit it like you would any code.
Right. Human review, security tools, still essential. So what are the practical limits here? Can V0 build my entire complex web application if I just write a really, really good prompt?
No, definitely not. The sources are clear on the limitations. V0 shines for UI components and speeding up prototyping,
Okay.
building a full-scale, production-ready application with complex business logic, back-end integrations, databases that still requires significant development effort beyond just the V0 output.
So it's a super-powered UI assistant, maybe a prototyping accelerator, but not a replacement for the whole development lifecycle.
That seems to be the accurate picture. It's front-end focused.
Right. Though you mentioned it can be integrated with backends?
Correct. It focuses on generating the front-end components, but they're designed to talk to any back-end via standard APIs, just like you'd expect.
Makes sense. And the million-dollar question, or maybe the $0 question, what's the cost?
According to the sources we looked at, it's free to use for public projects.
Hi.
If you need it for private repositories, it sounds like it might require a paid Vercel plan. They advise checking the official Vercel pricing page for the latest details on that.
Gotcha. Always check the pricing page. All right, this has been a really thorough deep dive into Vercel's V0. We've looked at how it uses AI to tackle that often repetitive UI building process.
Yeah, it's aimed at developers, designers, PMs, even potentially lowering the barrier for beginners.
Right, that democratization aspect is interesting. We covered the chat-based workflow, the iterative Maya method, those blocks.
And the Solid Tech Foundation React, Next.js, Tailwind, ShadCN, Radix.
Plus the powerful features like referencing designs from URLs or images, the Figma integration, forking chats for experiments.
And critically, those important considerations around manual testing for accessibility and security. It's not magic code.
Absolutely not. It's clearly positioned as a tool, an assistant, aiming to make UI creation faster, more intuitive, maybe more collaborative.
A significant step in blending AI automation with developer control in the front-end workflow.
Definitely. So wrapping this up, here's something to mull over based on everything we've pulled from these sources. If a tool like V0 can generate pretty decent, functional, responsive UI components just from a text prompt or by looking at a picture or a website, how does that start to change the fundamental skills someone needs just to get started building things on the web?
Yeah, what becomes the new baseline skill?
And thinking about that design to code handoff, the Figma integration, the quick iterations, how might this kind of tool reshape how designers and developers actually work together on a daily basis? What does that collaboration look like in the near future?